Hi everyone, today we are going to do modeling with equations. So essentially we're going to do some word problems today. Okay, so let's look at this first example. So we have find two consecutive even integers whose sum is 426. So there's one thing that I always want you to do first. I want you to read through the problem and figure out what they're asking you so you can define your variable. When you're setting up equations, it's really important that you know what your variable stands for. So if the question says to find two consecutive even integers, I'm going to say x equals the first integer. So it's super clear. I do need to see you defining your integers. Then I'm going to go through and try to interpret what some of these words mean. So when I see consecutive even integers, I know that consecutive even integers are always 2 units apart. So that would be like 2, 4, 6, 8, so on and so forth. And I know that sum means addition. And so you can see here that if the first integer is x and I want 2 consecutive, meaning next to each other, even integers, the next integer would be x plus 2. And here's whose sum is 426. So I would also like to see you set up an equation. So again, I need to see your variable defined and I need to see an equation. From there, you're just solving for x. So we get x equals 212. But you need to make sure you answer the question. They want 2 consecutive even integers. So x is the first one, but you need to list the second one as well. So these are my 2 answers, and check that the sum is actually 426. Okay, so this next example, we have a case where there's 2 people or 2 things working on the same job at the same time. So we want to see how long it takes when they're working together. So it says it takes 8 hours for a cheap pump to clear out a flooded basement, and it only takes 5 hours for an expensive pump to do the same job. So I highlighted those important points. How long would it take if both pumps were working on the same job at the same time? So a little trick is your variables are always going to answer the question. So if I said, how long would it take? X should equal the number of hours with both pumps working. So if you need to know how to define your variable, look at the question. So x equals the number of hours with both working. So here's how you do these types of problems. I'm going to think about this in terms of how much work can be done over the course of 1 hour. So if it takes 8 hours for the cheap pump to finish the job, that means in 1 hour it finishes 1/8 of the job. If it takes 5 hours for a pump to do a job, that means in 1 hour it finishes 1/5 of the job. And if it takes X hours to do the job total, that means in 1 hour you've completed 1/x of the job. So we can set up an equation saying here's the portion that the cheap pump finishes, 1/8 of the job, plus the portion that the good pump finishes, which is 1/5 of the job, and total, that means they've completed 1/x of the job. So from here, we have a rational equation. So one way you can solve it is by clearing your fractions by multiplying by the LCD, which is 40x. So when you do that, we have this equation, so much simpler, combine like terms and solve. So again, I do need to see that you've defined your variable because you need to remember what x is, and then I do need to see your initial equation, showing that you understand how to translate the words into numbers and variables. Okay, let's look at this next example. So here we have a rectangular plot of land is 6 feet longer than it is wide. Each diagonal from one corner to the opposite corner is 174 feet long. What are the dimensions of the land? So if they're asking for the dimensions, you can decide if you want to define x as the width or length. So I said x equals the width, and that means since it's 6 feet longer than it is wide, x plus 6 would be the length. So then I drew a little picture here. Here's my rectangular field, and we know rectangles have 4 right angles. So I have my length, my width, and my diagonal, which is 174. And here, since I have a right triangle, I can just use the Pythagorean theorem. So I have my a value squared plus my b value squared equals my c value squared. Just remember your hypotenuse, which is across from the 90, is always your C value. And then from here, the step I'd like you to watch out for is make sure that you multiplied this out correctly. X plus 6 squared means x plus 6 times x plus 6. So if you wrote x squared plus 36, you didn't do it correctly. Check that to common mistake. Combine like terms, and you have a quadratic equation that you can solve. So first, I divided it both sides by 2 to reduce it down a little bit. This you can actually solve by factoring if you work at it enough, or of course you can do the quadratic equation. You can graph it to see where it crosses your x-axis a number of ways. But by factoring, I got 2 possible solutions. Now you have to go back and remember, x is defined by the width of your field. It's not possible to have a negative width. So x must be 120. And then if x is 120, the length must be 120 plus 6. So the dimensions are 120 by 126 feet. Make sure you have your units as well. Okay, so here these last 2 examples are kind of similar. We have 7 liters of an acid solution was mixed with 3 liters of a 15% acid solution. So notice that first one, we're not sure about the percentage of acid in that solution. It's vague. To make a 29% acid solution, find the percent concentration of the first solution. So since this is what they're asking you to find, this is how we are going to define our variable. So notice x equals the percent concentration of the first solution. It answers your question. So a few things to keep in mind. If you want the amount of acid in a solution, it's the total amount, in this case liters of the solution, times the percent concentration as a decimal. So we can kind of say, okay, how much acid is from the first solution, how much acid is from the second solution, and how much acid is there total. So for the first solution, I know there's 7 times x. We don't know what the percent concentration is. Plus, from the second solution, there's 3 liters, and 15% of that is acid. So 3 times 0.15 would tell you how much acid is in that solution. Now the final, I know it doesn't specifically say, it says to make a 29% acid solution. It doesn't say how many liters there specifically, but you know if you start with 7 here and 3 here, your final solution has 10 liters. So you kind of have to put 2 and 2 together. So 10 times 0.29, and that's how much acid you have in your final solution. So now the first thing I did was I multiplied both sides by 100 to clear my decimals, giving me this equation, and then I solved for x. So I got x equals 0.35, which means it's a 35% concentration solution. So again, this is going to be a common setup. Total times percent plus total times percent equals total times percent. So you can use that setup for a wide variety of problems. So as you can see, this last problem is kind of similar, except you're finding a different thing this time. You're not finding a percentage, you're actually finding the quantity. So it says, what quantity of 80% sugar solution? So right off the bat, you can define your variable. X equals gallons of 80% solution. Quantity means amount. So find the units and define it right away. Needs to be mixed with 6 gallons of 90% solution to make an 84% sugar solution. So this is a little bit tricky. I know I have X gallons of the first solution. I know I have 6 gallons of the second solution. So maybe you're like, well, how much of the final solution do I have? Well, it would be X plus 6. So I know it's kind of weird to define it like that, but X plus 6 is the total gallons. Again, X represents the first one, 6 is the second one. So same idea. We're going to do total, or the volume, or the quantity times the percentage, plus quantity times percentage. So this is the amount of sugar in the first solution. This gives you the amount of sugar in the second solution, and this gives you the total amount of sugar in your final solution. So amount times percentage. And again, I cleared my decimals by multiplying both sides by 100, making it a little bit easier for me to solve, and I ended up with X equals 9. So 9 gallons of the 80% solution. All right, that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching.